Now let's talk about jobs, specifically the job market in India. 83% of the jobless workforce in India is under 34 years of age.
India is producing 100 million new people added to the workforce by 2030. Where are the jobs for them?
200,000 and counting. That's the number of tech workers who've been fired this season.
I think the sky is the limit for anybody coming to Christ University. So you're in a great place. My name is Ratan. So I work as a talent acquisition senior manager at a hedge fund called DE Shaw. Here's, I think, the biggest cheat sheet I'd like to give everybody who's listening to right now.
Hello sir, welcome to Intrigue, the podcasting club of DOC. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, first and foremost. My name is Ratan. I am a Christite born and bred. I passed out from here in the year 2008 with a degree in business management. Prior to that, I actually happened to study here in junior college as well. Did physics, chemistry, maths, and electronics there. My current job has nothing to do with all of those though. I work as a talent acquisition senior manager at a hedge fund called DE Shaw. I've had a couple of experiences before this. I worked at Amazon. I've also worked at Goldman Sachs, where my role there was vice president of campus recruitment. And I've also worked in the not-for-profit sector. So I used to teach myself in 7th and 8th standard to a group of underprivileged children. And I've also dabbled in the startup space a little bit. I've worked in HR tech specifically. So that's a little about me. I'm looking forward to getting a little more into this conversation today. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you sir for coming. So how did you switch from HR to sales and again back to HR? Like what prompted you to shift back to HR?
I think there are a lot of skills you pick up, whether you know it or not, through even a function like HR, which you may find very interesting that it can be used in a place like sales. Basic things like communication, basic things like keeping people informed, having stakeholder management skills are things that are universally looked at as skills to have, right? And so the use case may change for each of these skills, but you may find that each of these can bring you success no matter in HR or in sales or in your own startup or back to HR. So there are skills that you can truly take and lift and shift them in a different context, in a different setup. And you learn a lot more through that, right? Because you're trying to use some of your previous experiences, but also contextualize that in the new situation that you're in, and accordingly act in a way that's going to make you successful in that next phase. So I think it's very easy to do things like this as long as you have the mindset to be able to be nimble enough to move your context. The skills are going to remain the same. There may be varying levels that will be required, but you can easily pick up what is required from your previous job and use it in a place that's actually going to give you success. So that's what I would say to that. It's very doable, and a lot of people change careers depending on their aspirations, because your aspirations change at different points of time in your life as well, right? What you may want to do today could be very different what you do 5 or 10 years from now. So I think go with your gut, and I think you'll be able to find out that everything else kind of works out in the long term.
So some people are scared to take that step, like a career switch is like a huge point in their life. How did you take that? Like what courage did you take?
I think for me it was just a very personal aspiration to start something from scratch and build something out in a way that fulfilled me professionally. Having worked in the HR space for more than a decade and a half, you sometimes start wondering what beyond this is there that I can look forward to, what's going to get me up the next morning, and what's going to keep me up and probably give me a smile on my face as I go to sleep the next night. So I think things like these made me kind of decide eventually that I'd like to start something on my own. I'm still running that organization, by the way, while doing my current job at DE Shaw. And I'm lucky I'm in an organization that allows me to be able to kind of pursue my passions and pursue being able to build something out from scratch. So I think that's how it worked for me, but I recognize that this is not an easy decision to make, and everybody is on their own journey with regards to just being able to change this out, right? So that's what I would say to that. I think you just need to really do it for yourself. Your motivations and the reason you want to do it needs to be very clear in your mind, and then after that you'll find everything else translating.
So you started Talbloom and then you went to D Shaw. Like was there a specific thing that attracted you about Desha?
Oh yes, in fact, Desha was an organization that was sought after when I was in college as well. Back in 2008, they were the first company that came. I could not get into Desha back then, and for me, it was almost like this is a chance for me to be able to go back to a place that I really wanted to at one point in time. So that. I'd say nostalgia, that aspiration that I had at one point in time was, I think, unfulfilled, and I feel like I was able to balance out the responsibilities in a way that helped me as well. And when I was able to speak to people who interviewed me at Desha, they were able to see that I had skills that can be used in their organization, and they were able to give me the opportunity and the role. So yeah, I think for me it was just wanting to go back to that place and right or wrong for lack of a better word. But yeah, that's how I think I approached it, and I'm a better person for it, and I'm a better professional for it as a result.
So let's talk about the black hole of recruitment, ATS. So there was an experiment that was conducted recently where they used like ATS friendly keywords on a forged resume, and that resulted into 72 calls. So is there a place where underqualified people they take it for granted because of the ATS? What's your take on it?
All right. I'd like us to take a step back first and just understand what is an ATS, right? In a very rudimentary way, an ATS is an applicant tracking system. Now, there are different applicant tracking systems that have a different level of offerings, and in some places, I would say it's easy to some extent get a little ahead of the process, right? I would say gaming it is maybe oversimplifying it a lot, because it's going to get you up to a certain point, even if those keywords are there. After that, it's really going to depend on your interaction with the person interviewing you, on the skills that you have, on the knowledge that you have. Look, one thing that's important for you to note is that any interview is trying to assess three things, right? A candidate's knowledge, a candidate's skills, and a candidate's mindsets. Knowledge, I think, is the easiest thing to gain. You read something, you know something about it. You watch a podcast, you know something about that particular topic. Skill is a little more difficult because there's an application component involved there, right? It's how you take your knowledge and put it into a skill that determines what kind of a competency you have on it. Mindset, I think, is the most difficult thing to have, because that is conditioned over years and years of thinking in a certain way. So I think that is not something you can game through an ATS by just putting a few keywords. All right. More than that, I think an applicant tracking system is meant to do exactly that. Just track somebody's application as they go through the process. Once you apply to any role, it's something called a candidate ID gets generated, right? So to that organization, you will be linked to that particular identification number, and any role you apply to after that for the rest of your life to that company is going to be looked at from there. So that's what it does. It tracks at what point of time, in what stage of your life did you apply to what role, and 5-6 years down the line, how well did somebody do in that profile or somebody do in that interview 3 or 4 years ago. And so are there any formative data points that I can use at least to see whether this person is going to be good for the new role that they've applied to, right? In a rudimentary sense, that's what an applicant tracking system does. There are, of course, certain keywords that exist that, depending on the job description that you're applying to, if those same keywords are there, with the invent of AI, with a lot of these other things that are in the fore right now from a technology standpoint, you can get shortlisted. But the only thing that does is you'll basically go into another bucket of applicants who have those keywords, right? In no way is that going to give you an advantage at the interview stage, though, because there it's just your skills, your knowledge, and your mindset that's going to do all the speaking. So to demystify this black hole, in some ways it may help, but also all of this is very new. All these scripts, all these AI being used in recruitment is still very new. And by the way, in a lot of places in the world, there are a lot of laws that actually prevent machines from making hiring decisions on you, because machines are biased. You mentioned it as well in your question. So in a lot of places, including in New York State, which is where most of the finance companies are based, you actually can't have decisions based on a system or an LLM, and so that's something to be able to kind of watch out for. At the end of the day, a human set of eyes are going to be looking at your CV, and a person is going to be using their judgment through their thinking and decide whether you're good enough for a job or not.
Yes. What are the mindsets that you're looking for in a candidate?
Firstly, I think just be very open to learn. You may have done an amazing job at college. You may have started clubs. You may have won competitions, but the ball game is slightly different once you enter the corporate world. So how open are you to being able to learn those experiences is, I think, the first and most important thing that is being assessed in an interview. I think the second thing is just, are you able to articulate your impact, right? You can write on a CV with a bullet point, founded a club or won a competition. That's not enough today. You need to talk more about what did you do, what was the impact, how many people did your club reach out to, how did you measure success for your own club and for your own self. That's what gives people talking points to be able to ask you more questions, right? So that's what people look for, or recruiters look for when they look at a CV. They look for, is there impact that you can articulate? And I think the third one that I look for particularly is, what are the type of questions at the end of the interview that the candidate is asking me?
What's the best question that you've got?
There's a range of questions I've got, honestly. But I think what impresses me and a lot of recruiters like me is, how aware are you of the organization that you're applying to? Are you aware of the news bits that are happening? Are you aware of basic things like what sector this is, the requirements of the role? These are very important things for you to be able to understand. And once you understand that, you can have powerful conversations through questions that you can ask at the end, right? But I'll give you one example of a question that I was asked at the end of the interview. I did not see this coming at all. Usually in an interview, I ask candidates, where do you see yourself 3 or 5 years from now? I got asked that at the end of my interview with a candidate at another college, which I shall not name. They asked me, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? It was one of these moments where I was completely befuddled. I could not believe that somebody asked me that, but I thought, fair enough. I mean, I'm asking this person a question that, is only I think is fair. So why shouldn't I give the person the answer to that question as well? So it made me think a little bit, but I thought that was an interesting question to be asked at the end of an interview. As an interviewer, I've never at least been asked that question.
So recruiters get a lot of cold emails, and networking as a fresher is quite daunting. Do you actually go through the cold emails, and what are the tips you would give for a cold email?
I think any serious recruiter should look into every single person who's taken the effort to write to you asking about an opportunity or a role. And sometimes we're not able to come back because of just the scale of the amount of people who reached out, right? I try to the extent possible, come back to anybody who's reached out to me, and I try to make that interaction meaningful. But I think a few tips. Tell me a little about why this is important to you as a person, and tell me a little about what are you going to do with an opportunity if you were to get it, right? These are two things I think are very important for you to articulate in your cold email, right? We're looking for catchy things that stick out as a way that could help recruiters understand who the person at the other end of the screen is, and so I think it's important to be able to kind of use AI in a way that makes sense here, because Perplexity, OpenAI, all of these are going to give you very, very good tips to be able to kind of get into the inbox of a recruiter and make an impact there. It goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier. A CV can't just be did this or did that. Give us a little more details to go with here, right? Make it interesting enough for us to be able to write back to you and be able to kind of ask you more questions about it, right? More often than not, though, recruiters' hands are tied as well, right? As a result of placements are over, what are we supposed to do? And by the way, the placement roles are set by the college, right? We can't reach out to candidates over and above the time that we have on college. So that's the reason why sometimes, even if we'd like to come back to candidates, whether it's for internship roles or full-time roles, we are not able to. Now, though, I think things are changing. I see a lot more off-campus hiring drives also that are happening. I also see a lot of apprentice programs that are coming up because of a mandate by the government of India, by the way. So most companies are thinking about this because it's now a mandate. All of us have to think about bringing in more talent into their organizations through something called the apprenticeship model. And this is again something that the Ministry of Human Resource Development has actually mandated. So this gives more opportunities for candidates to be able to kind of reach out to recruiters or hiring managers or business heads and tell them, would you like to hire me as an apprentice? I'd like to learn more about your function, and I'd like to contribute in this and this and this way. That will make you stick out, and that will make either a business head or a hiring manager or a recruiter come back to you. So that's what I would say. I think just like articulate impact, talk about what you've done already in a succinct manner, in a way that catches people's attention, and you'll definitely see at least serious recruiters coming back to you and wanting to talk more about it.
Yes, sir. So if someone who hasn't gotten into like Christ placements and they apply from outside, what makes them stand out?
Again, it really depends. Usually, and I'll say this with confidence, most organizations have a subset of colleges they want to hire interns and full-time hires from. And the reason for that is simple. We're not trying to be exclusive. We just feel that students from a certain set of colleges have made consistently good decisions over a long period of time, which I can say that for Christ University. Having been a student here myself and having come back to Christ University to intern year after year since 2011, I can tell very clearly that people here take things seriously. If it's going to be from some other college, the first question that's going to come into my mind is, are they serious about things? Is this an opportunity that this person will take with both arms open and learn in the way that it should be, or is this person just going to try to get something on this person's resume and move on to bigger and better things, just doing it for the experience, etc., right? So I think the chance is still there, but most organizations have a subset of schools that they want to hire from, and there's no reason for this apart from the fact that they've seen people from colleges like Christ University do exceedingly well and grow at multiple levels in their organizations. And so you're taking a bet essentially on a candidate, and you look at the probability of what chances there are for that person to do exceedingly well and give back value to the organization, right? If it's from another college that's perhaps not that perhaps has a lower bar for admission, then chances are it's going to be a little more difficult for that individual to be able to crack it. But again, like I said, things are changing, right? With the apprentice program that's going to be rolled out very soon, it's been rolled out already in a couple of organizations that I'm aware of. You still have, I think, a level playing field, and I think that's the challenge for a lot of companies going forward. Can you democratize talent? Just because you are from a certain college, that doesn't mean that everybody from that college is good. And just because you're not from that college, that doesn't mean everybody from the other colleges are bad, right? It's just that how do you scale? The biggest question that recruiters are wondering is, look at the number of colleges that are there in this country, right? At the end of the day, if we get constantly bombarded by candidates from all of these colleges, something's got to give, right? We've got to be able to find out a more scientific way of being able to find those diamonds in the rough, as I like to call it, right? And get candidates in who approach this with all seriousness.
Yeah. So does the gap year actually reduce the probability of you getting hired? And have you taken a gap year personally? Did it affect you?
I've taken gap years. I know of a lot of people who've taken gap years. It used to be the case where a lot more questions used to be asked about that gap year, but I feel like it's good if you're able to kind of just take some time, that could be a year, that could be a few months, for you to just like sit back and ask yourself, where are you headed professionally, personally, and is this sparking joy in you, right? A lot of organizations now have amazing programs to help returning mothers come back to work, right? It just so happens biologically women are going to take some time off in their careers because of personal reasons. And organizations are becoming mature to that. They are being able to recognize that there is a certain point in time when your family has to be your biggest priority. So almost every organization I've worked at in my career has a program that gets people with breaks, whether that's a man or a woman, to come back and join the organization and see how this works, and then slowly but surely scale up to positions that would be able to do justice to an individual. Because think about this, right, Navya? You may have had 8-10 years of experience. You're taking a break. To get that person back at the entry level is doing disservice to that person. You need to be able to honor that experience that person comes with. So these programs, I think, are very important to have in most organizations, and I think they are an incredible way of bringing extremely good talent back into the organization, right? So that gap year could be because of a personal reason, it could be because of a professional pursuit. In my case, I started doing something on the side by building my own organization, right? And so it's again how you articulate what you did in that gap year that matters, Navya, right? If you're able to talk about your struggles, your successes, your challenges, and how you overcame them during that gap year of what you were doing, then that also can be a good thing in a lot of cases, right? Like I said, organizations, I think, for the better, are becoming more mature to the fact that you may want to do something slightly different, and you don't have to be a machine working 40 years for a certain organization or a certain sector. So I think that's changed for the good.
So I worked at EY, and my partner told me that they prefer people who grow through in the organization rather than people who are hopping like jobs. So because they are like grown over there, they understand the ethics, the morals, and they trust the person. Than the person who is just job hopping like throughout their 20s. What do you think about it?
I would agree that, if somebody has been in an organization for a long time, there's some part of the culture that just gets ingrained in you. And once you grow in your career, if you're making a change, right, there's a lot of unlearning you need to do. And then relearn things the way that it needs to happen in the new organization. So that can be a challenge. That transition from one sector to another, from one organization to another, can be challenging for a lot of individuals. And so a lot of companies, I wouldn't say prefer, but believe that things may be a little easier from a transition standpoint. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you what, Navya, if there are certain roles to be filled in, I want to fill them at the end of the day. Internal, external is just, I'm not going to split hairs over that. I'm not going to be stuck up about that. If I get quality talent from somewhere else also, good. And I think if you keep just promoting internally, that may not be the best, because it's a very homogeneous way of thinking then. What are you doing to be able to question the status quo? Questioning of the status quo can happen only when somebody new comes in from a different place. Otherwise, everybody's just going to be doing the same thing that they've been doing for donkey's years. Right? At no point are you actually stepping back and critically thinking about processes, about impact. And so just saying that I want only internal people to get promoted, etc., I think is just a very myopic way of looking at things. You need to have a balance of internal and external. And it's going to be difficult, right? That conflict of, oh, but I have a better way of getting this done. And the other people saying, no, we've done this for 20 years. This is how it works. But through that conflict, there's collaboration. Through that conflict, you ask yourself, what truly matters in this moment? What is our client really looking for? And what is the best decision for the client, not for the culture, the organization, the 20 years of processes, or just because you want to try something new, you're not going to do something new, right? So I think there's power in having balance when it comes to both of those aspects, Navya.
Is job hopping on your 20s looked down upon?
I'll say this. I think your first job is important, and it's important to stick through the first year at least in your first job. Because for everybody, there's a lot going on that's very new to you. So I've hopped jobs in my 20s. I wouldn't recommend it because a lot of questions that I was asked was exactly on that. But I believe that, each of those experiences has made me introspect and give answers at the end of the day that are honest, right? I wouldn't have a job today if I wasn't honest about my experiences. And you know what? It's not going to work out in all of the places. In some places, the experiences are not going to be what you're looking for. And that's fine. You can be vulnerable enough to admit that some of these experiences was not what you were looking for in a professional way. You don't need to go into the details. You don't need to wash dirty linen out in public. But what you can do is a very professional and respectful way. Say, I was looking for something else, right? I will say this though, that first point of sticking a year in your first job is important. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a lot of reality checks that you're going to have as an individual and as a professional, and a lot of questioning about what value am I actually bringing to the table. But at the end of it, all your learnings in that first year are going to help you. That's your foundation. That's the bedrock that your whole professional career is going to be built on. So I think sticking that first year through is going to be important for you. Too much job hopping is certainly going to work
How
against
much
you.
is too much?
I'd say, so a decade, 20 to 30. If you've got more than 3 job changes,
Really?
that's going to be questioned.
More than 3?
More than 3 is going to be questioned. 2, I think, is normal. Nobody expects you to work in one company for 10 years. In the middle of the 4th year or 5th year, you may want to look out as well in terms of what else is there. And there's nothing personal about it, Navya. What you need to recognize is that you are applying to a job and they have a requirement, right? The question is important for you to be able to authentically answer. But at the end of the day, again, the more important thing at that point is for that organization to fill in that role. If you're a flight risk, in that if I see you speaking in that interview and already you're telling me I'm thinking about doing my MBA a month from now, 2 months from now, applying for my GMAT, those are going to be bigger things to be able to watch out for. But more than 3 changes in a decade, I do think can sometimes invite certain questions that you need to be prepared for. Again, it's not the worst thing that can happen to you, and as long as you have like reasons that back up why you changed or why you looked at different experiences in your early 20s, I think that's fine, because you're still figuring it out, right? You've just started working. How do you know this is where you're going to succeed for your entire career, and how are you going to know if you don't try things out? So be vulnerable enough to be able to admit.
So, like, a lot of students, because they don't make the cutoff for CGPA, but they have the skill sets. Do you think the system is like frauding them because of that?
Unfortunately, at this point, that's the only thing you can assess a student on. They don't have professional experience to speak of.
What if
They-
they have like the work experience, they have the internships, but it's just the CGPA cutoff?
So, there is importance given to CGPA in jobs where there is an incredibly high amount of attention to detail that's required, right? If you're working on a profit and loss statement, or if you're working on detailed financial sheets, you can't make mistakes on that. There is client impact that happens for the worse if you get individuals that are not the best fit there. There are organizations that don't have a CGPA cutoff as well, right? But at the end of the day, if it's important, again, it just means that this person has consistently made good decisions and taken academics serious enough to be able to show positive impact for the long run, right? Does it defraud the students? I think at the time that you're applying for an internship or a full-time role right out of college, yes. But you'll find as your career progresses that CGPA means little every year after you've passed out from college. At the end of the day, if you have a first class from a good university, you're going to be looked at favorably throughout your career. But let's think about this. Let's think about the scale again now. Yeah, when any organization comes to Christ University, students here are amazingly smart. How are you going to make that cut then? You have a certain number of requirements that you're coming for as an organization. There are thousands of very, very smart children around here, right? So you have to start thinking about what makes a student stand out over others. It's objective, nothing personal about it. It's just a very objective way of thinking about what the cutoff is and how should a student be approaching certain conversations as part of the CGPA, because no amount of please give me an exception, etc. is going to work. You have a certain standard that you as an organization are committing to your clients, and you have to hold that, because that's just what professionality asks for. So right now it may defraud, it may appear at least that you've been wronged, but as time progresses, I can guarantee you that CGPA does not mean as much when you're an experienced professional. It's
So
just
you
that
still
first.
keep- Yes, sir. So for a GD round, there are a lot of myths, like if I talk first or if I have a certain voice modulation, that's going to get me through. Could you say what you should do and what you shouldn't do in a GD, and how do you assess people on it?
Yeah. Again, it used to be the case that if you speak first, second, or third, then your chances are that you're probably going to get through for the interview round. But now I think the way that your assessment of the group discussions also is evolving. How many overall contributions do you have in a 20-minute group discussion? Are you just speaking once and then just sitting back and just like watching everything else happen, right? That's not going to work for an organization that's assessing people, because what's being assessed in a group discussion is team dynamics. how thoughtful you are about a certain topic? Are you able to solicit other people who've been quiet to be able to bring out points?
You're expected to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not expected, but it certainly helps if you're able to start a conversation, right? You just talking about it seems a little more like a lecture. This is a group discussion, and I cannot focus or stress on this enough. The group discussion ends after the time is over. I've seen people go back and make this extremely ugly after the group discussion is over. Nobody is even watching, and the people are still talking about for or against a certain topic, right? That's not going to bode very, very well as well, right? In terms of people's assessment of your group discussion skills. It helps that you've contributed early because you're then providing some level of direction for the entire group, right? But what also helps is the other factors that I mentioned, your overall contributions. I think your voice is important. Like, people need to know if you speak, are other people listening? Other things that I think get a little lost out on are you following what's happening in the rest of the group discussion? Is your mind on? Like, is somebody else saying something that's piqued your interest that you want to come back to at some point of time, right? And are you able to summarize the group discussion at the end, right? Because that tells me that you've been paying attention throughout. You had important points to contribute as well that has, shaped the way the group discussion is played out. And you've been able to solicit points from people who perhaps have been a little more quiet during the whole point. So those are things I think that really help you in a group discussion, Navya.
So what are the skills? Are you looking for certain skills in the GD round?
Communication,
Okay.
thoughtfulness about the topic, team dynamics, and your ability to summarize at the end of it. These are some of the things that we look at. And if I were to make a parallel to the corporate world, right? This is what a meeting really is. People have different stances on a certain topic. There's something called a minutes of the meeting that happens at the end of every meeting that gets sent out. And all the points that were discussed in that meeting basically need to be encapsulated. Right? So that's why that summary part is very, very important. That's why you being on for the entire time is important, because then it shows that you've been paying attention throughout. You've been watching for cues, verbal, non-verbal, all of these, and being able to kind of synthesize that in a way that's going to help you in terms of your next steps. So the closest parallel I can draw from a group discussion is any corporate meeting that happens. This is exactly like how it happens. Most people spend the first 5-7 minutes orienting themselves to what is it that we're trying to do here, right? They're given the topic, 2 minutes to prepare. At that point, they have some thoughts that they're jotting down. But then after that is when it truly kicks into action, and then people start sharing a lot more openly.
Does the first word or whatever they've said, the first line, actually give a huge impact?
Not really. It may give some impact because, like I said, it helps in providing some direction for the entire group discussion. But beyond that, it's your overall contributions that matters more, right? People will make a note of the fact that this person was the first person to speak. And it can be something as small as just repeating the discussion topic out again. So you think you're doing very little, but actually that's having the most impact there. Right? And it could be something as little as the topic is an active voice, you change it to passive voice. So these are small tricks and small traits that you can certainly kind of latch onto and pick on, but the impact of this can be far exceeding in terms of the benefits you can get.
What are the negatives that you shouldn't do in a GD?
First and foremost, this is a group discussion, not a group debate, not a group argument. This is not Times Now or any of these other channels where a lot of passion comes through. I think people are trying to look for balance again in terms of how you're able to put your points. Are you respectful? Like, if you show disrespect to anybody there, then and there it's basically a no. Sometimes it can be very passionate, right? You can kind of speak loud, and a lot of people are kind of in that same moment trying to get a word in. If you're the first person to take a step back, that's actually going to be looked at very favorably, because that means that you're open to somebody else's point of view at the cost of your own point of view, right? Because you were thinking about the larger group discussion, holistically. So being respectful is important. Not making it an argument or not making a debate is very, very important. And if you're just like there as like furniture, like a fly on the wall, that's not going to help either, right? Like you're there to talk, you're there to be able to make some contribution at least. Don't just sit there for the entire 20 minutes and just look at it like a tennis match. That's not going to help.
Yes, sir. So now in corporate, like I've done my BCom, but then later after 3-4 years, I don't have a CFA, I don't have a CA or an MBA. Do you think it's going to stagnate my growth in the organization?
It depends on what you want to do, right, Navya? Certain roles require you to have a CA or a CFA. Certain roles require you to have an MBA, right? Consulting, if that's something that is important to you, if that's something you'd like to do, then it's important to have an MBA degree because it makes you think holistically about a lot of things that you learn from your MBA classes. If you are interested in accounting or P&L statements, then at some point having a CFA or a CA is going to better your chances to grow and get into the place that you want to get into. But just because you've not done it while studying BCom, that doesn't mean you can't do it later on. I know organizations that are happy with the fact that you want to pursue something on the side and give you that level of flexibility where you're able to pursue a CFA or a CA on the side, get that necessary certification, and through that actually for them itself it kind of helps, right? Because they are always looking for talent. You happen to just have got a certification, so instead of them going to a college and hiring, they'd rather, to an earlier point, look at you more seriously and see if this is an opportunity that you'd like to kind of pursue. They'd speak to you first about it, right? So I think it all depends on what you want to do, Navya. If you want to kind of pursue degree or pursue a certification that's going to better your chances in a specific field, then yes, it is important for you to get that certification, because formalized education, there's no replacement to that. You can't ask ChatGPT or all of these LLMs to be able to kind of give you what a chartered accountant can give you. Not right now, at least. Not in its current state. Who's seen the future? Maybe in 5 years, 7 years from now, all of these are going to be obsolete. But for now, at least, I'm fairly confident that it's a rigorous course that you go through, whether that's CA, CFA or MBA, and so your growth is usually correlated to that, and so it helps to have a formalized education there. If you want to just test the waters out in one place and then figure out if a CA is meant for you or an MBA is meant for you, then that's fine as well. But again, it depends on your own personal ambition of what you want to kind of pursue at that point.
As a student who's sitting for placements, and if I'm going for an interview, is it possible for me to steer the interview in a certain direction and have control over it?
Here's, I think, the biggest cheat sheet I'd like to give everybody who's listening to right now. An interview is not determined by the interviewer. It's always determined by the interviewee, by the person who's being interviewed. Right from the CV that you give, to the answers that you give on your CV. Everything is something you're providing. Everything is something that you are giving direction to. The interviewer is just taking tips and clues out of that and asking you questions about yourself, right? So I think that's important. I think it's important to recognize that there is an incredibly high amount of power that the person being interviewed has in an interview, more than somebody who's actually interviewing. Yes, the final decision comes from the interviewer. But in steering that conversation, in asking the questions at the end of it, all of that comes from the person being interviewed. So it's important to know that, Navya. It's important to recognize. And now that you know that, you need to create your CV in a way that's going to be compelling enough for the person to ask you the questions that you want them to ask you. Right?
So how would you do that? If you were sitting in my shoes, how would you control an interview?
I would first look at the job description thoroughly and see what is it that this organization is looking for, or what is it that this team is looking for. I would look at the LinkedIn profiles of people in that team. I would find out as much as I can about the organization, the sector, what is the priority for the organization at that point in time, and then accordingly start creating my resume in a way that's going to talk to that. Right? So if, for instance, I see environmental social governance is important to the organization, I'll make sure that any experiences I have of mine in the social space is being highlighted. For instance, let's say I've been a part of the CSA activities in Christ University. I'd make sure I speak about that a lot at the interview. I'd make sure I highlight that in bullets, I bold it, I underline it. All of these things are small things you can do to be able to influence the type of questions that you're going to be asking. It's psychology at the end of the day, right? If you make something stand out, it's going to stand out. People are going to pick that up and ask you questions about it. So that's what I would do. Those are a few things at least I would do. But I think thoroughly researching the company, thoroughly researching what's new right now for that organization, what's in the news, what is its share price, what are its recent struggles from a business standpoint, what is their usage of AI, right? This is very important as well. Because at the end of the day, all companies right now are looking for a balance between AI and people who can actually do the work, right? So those are small things that are important for you to ask at the interview, because the world is talking about AI. And if you mention AI in the conversation or about how you've used AI in your past, then that's only going to help your chances to see, where could be the alignment, right?
Are there any keywords like that, community?
There are, and I think you'll get that from the job description.
Okay, so only from the GD.
And from the company's website as well. You'll get a lot of these words from the company's website as well. So, one more tip I'll give you. Your CV can't be the same that you apply to every organization. Because every organization values different things. It can have the same message, it can have the same content, but the way you frame it is what I think is going to be important, right? So it used to be a cover letter. A cover letter would talk about why you're particularly interested in that organization. But more or less companies have done away with the cover letter concept.
Is it still relevant?
It's not, which is why I'm telling you your CV needs to be different. It's basically like a pitch you're making to the organization, right? You're not going to have the same pitch to every single person you speak to if you have a business. It has to be modulated to what the business is looking for, right? So similarly, every recruiter or every team is looking for a different set of skills, or the same skills but in a different context, and so your pitch to that needs to be different, right? So it can't be a lazy effort in that I used this in the last company, I'm not going to make changes, I'm just going to... No, put in the effort. You will find that helps. You will find that effort is directly, correlated to your success in the interview process for that organization.
Yes, sir. So we have some rapid fire questions.
Okay, sure. I'm being interviewed now. Okay.
Rank them in order of importance: brand value, salary, or job role.
Brand value first, job role second, salary third.
Okay. If a student gets placed in a role they don't love, what's the smartest way to make the most out of it?
Sorry, say that again?
If the student doesn't get placed in the role that they love, what's the smartest way to make the most out of it?
Introspect and learn from that experience. Find out what did you say that you think could have had the wrong decision coming through to you, and what do you need to do to kind of make that change next time around. Everybody knows what happens in an interview, at what point the interview did not work in your favor. So just try to find out what was that made the difference and use that for your advantage the next time you're being interviewed.
3 green flags that you look for in a candidate.
The questions being asked at the end of the interview, the research done on the organization that I represent, and the impact that you're being able to articulate in your CV. Those are 3 things I put.
3 red flags are an absolute no for you.
If somebody asked me at the end of the interview process, can you give me specific feedback? That's a red flag. No company can do that. It's a very personalized, it's a very professionalized process. As soon as you say, give me feedback, it becomes personal. And companies are not they don't have the ability to do that, right? Because in some way you're giving away the cheat sheet of what is it that companies are looking for. Right?
Have you ever seen a candidate that completely changed your opinion in a mid-interview?
Oh, yes. This has happened several times. You have a certain perception of a certain candidate and how you think they're going to add value based on perhaps the degree they're pursuing or based on what they're sharing with you. But after that, through conversations, you realize that there's more to it that meets the eye. Half an hour at the end of the day is very, very less for us to be able to identify a person's entire life, right? At any point of time in the interview, that whole thing can be flipped, right? And so, again, it depends on that specific question that I was prompted to ask that person. And the answer I got after that just made me sit back and think, okay, maybe I got this person wrong. I can't share names, I can't share specific instances, but this has happened multiple times.
Yes, sir. One hard truth about placements nobody talks about.
It's the start. I wouldn't be too fixated on this being a measure of your success. It feels bad at the end of the day if you're not getting placed on day one, but at the end of the day, you are learning a tremendous amount through that experience. And so through that dejection, let's be honest, it's probably one of the first times you're facing dejection to that level, right? Through that, it's important to just sit back and learn and be able to dissociate yourself from that situation and ask yourself, if you were a third party just observing everything from above, what would you take back into your day-to-day? Those, I think, are difficult pills to swallow, but I think at the end of the day, helpful for you overall.
Yes, sir. One thing you wish every final year student knew before they enter the workforce?
That's a great question. It's a part of your life, not your whole life, right? I find very soon people coming in with that gusto and the enthusiasm that they're going to change the world, and that's great to see, but that can't be the only thing that defines you. Your career is a marathon at the end of the day, it's not a sprint. So I think it's important for you to recognize that and do things that give you joy as well. You put a lot of your time into an organization, into the work that you do, but it's also important for you to be able to give yourself some time to be able to recover from everything else and make you that enthusiastic over a long term, right? So that's what I would say. Continue your passions, continue your hobbies. It doesn't mean that you have to stop. You are who you are because of everything you've done on the side. And just because you've started working at a place, that doesn't mean you put a full stop on everything else.
As a big company or a startup, what would you choose?
Again, this is very personal for everybody. I think a professional, established organization gives you structure. So the early part of your career, I think that's important.
But don't you want to grow? Isn't it more
Yes.
like very...
At a certain point of time, for me, it's important to grow and take on more, but that structure that you get, that formalized induction that you get into most companies is something that you cannot replace anytime. And so startup experience, I would actually prefer that you work at a professional, established organization for a while, get the experiences, get to know how things are done at like an elite level, and then replicate that in a startup to be able to be, contribute value. Because without that, you don't have a vision of excellence. You don't have, you're working with like blinders, honestly. You just feel like everything you're doing is the best, is right, and there's nobody to question that either. So it's important, I think, to have a good vision of excellence and then follow something that's a passion for you. I've seen things work the other way around as well, but if you ask me a preference, I think your formative years are very, very important. And so having structure in your formative years, having mentors in your formative years, having a vision in your formative years is important for you to do well.
Yes, sir. So one concluding advice for all the students at Christ.
I think you're lucky that you're in an institute that values your development at the rate at which Christ University offers. From personal experience, I can tell you that not a lot of other institutes around India are able to do what Christ is able to do. I'd say make the most of all the opportunities you have and articulate that. I cannot stress this enough. It's not enough for you to just do a good job. You need to be able to talk about the job that you do as well, to make you compelling, to make you interesting. And I think the sky is the limit for anybody coming to Christ University. So you're in a great place. Give back to this place as well is my only point.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really insightful talking to you.
Thank you,
so
Navya.
much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.